introduce Liz Dunn. First, I'll give you a little background on me. I'm a board member of Yale Blue Green, also sharing with Judy Yale Blue Green Chicago. I'm been involved with Yale Women Chicago and the Yale Women Writers. We've been writing together several times a week for a couple of years. I like to do environmental writing, but I'm really an environmental artist. But let's get to Liz. I am very excited about this. Liz and I have had the honor to serve on Yale Chicago's board for several years together. We share a love of urban biking, which has been embraced by the city of Chicago since I started back in the 1979 era, which was not embraced. So we now have Chicago's Bike the Drive. That's Lakeshore Drive that gets shut down. Bike the Boulevards. That's where you can bike throughout the Chicago neighborhoods. I've biked on Fork in the Road, where you get to bike and eat at different stops along the way. And they teach you how to have a group of people take a left turn through traffic, which is always good to know. But Liz and I chatted last spring at Chicago's Climate Museum, which was a brand new museum. And there's more. There's more activism needed. And Liz is on the forefront of that. And I'm delighted. So I'd like to introduce Liz and hear what she has with the joys of urban biking and the perils.
Yes. Thank you, Margot. And I'm Yale Trumbull College 2010. And actually my day job is at Marcy Housing Lakefront, and maybe sometime we'll talk about our sustainability work there. But yeah, in my free time, I bike a lot. And how many people here, can you raise your hands, I guess, if you bike? I heard somebody say that they bike. Good amount. Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen for this.
Oh, wait, I think I have to authorize sharing. Wait just a second.
Whoops.
All right, try it now.
Okay. Here's this, sorry. We're mainly on Teams in, you see the whole, yeah. Do you see this now?
Yeah.
What we want? Okay. Better or worse? Good?
That's great. Yep.
Better. Yeah.
So many of you bike. Maybe you care anyway because you're out on the road. But even if you don't personally bike, why should you care about bike infrastructure and bikeability of cities in the city of Chicago? Well, we all here know about emissions and the challenges of climate change. So we are working in the city of Chicago to reduce our emissions, to try to combat climate change and be on track with the Paris Climate Accord, right? So according to CMAP, from 2010 to 2019, most sectors saw an improvement in emissions, but actually transportation saw increased emissions. Despite the improvement in efficiency of vehicles, we increased total vehicle miles traveled. So things are getting worse. Beyond just the emissions coming from car exhaust, there's also tire, brake, and road surface wear that account for actually 90% of particulate emissions from vehicles. So the shift to electric vehicles isn't the answer. So this impacts our water quality, impacts our air quality. Actually, electric vehicles tend to be heavier, and so that increases the wear. So there have been some statistics that have come out lately, whether or not they're debatable. There was something like 78% of microplastics in the ocean are from tire wear particulates. There was also a recent study that looked at why are fish in rivers dying off when it rains? Well, it's because of the chemicals that are coming from tires and running off into the river. Those are toxic. So we really need to get people out of cars. And what could be an answer for that? Yes, public transportation, but also that takes a lot of investment. Really, bikes could be at least part of the answer. In Chicago, 51% of vehicle trips are actually less than 3 miles. That's a very easily bikeable distance. Additionally, we now have had a lot of improvements and innovations in e-bikes and e-cargo bikes. So these are going to use fewer materials and produce less emissions than cars, but allow you to be able to do longer trips without getting all sweaty, transport your groceries, transport other types of cargo, transport children. And it doesn't have to be everyone. Some people are never going to get on a bike. That's okay. But if we could do a 50% reduction in these shorter trips by car, it would be transformational. You could have families go from being 2-car families to being 1 car and 1 cargo bike. It would be a huge reduction in the number of vehicles on our roads. So, as Margot said, in some ways, Chicago is bike friendly. This is me on Bike the Drive. So there's all sorts of events that encourage people to get out. A lot of people have bikes, a lot of people participate, tens of thousands of people participate in these types of activities. Next to Lakeshore Drive, we actually have the Lakefront Trail, which, when I saw a study of the Lakefront Trail, that usage is absolutely off the charts compared to other trails that have been studied across the country. There's just so many people biking, whether it's for leisure or to get downtown. Chicago ranks 7th in per capita bike trips among the top 100 US metro areas, and that's been growing actually since COVID. But on the other hand, People for Bikes ranked us 99 out of 104 in bike friendliness. Due to high speed limits, most of the city is a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, the lack of connectivity of our bike infrastructure, and the amount of the bike infrastructure that we have that's high stress. So I think, Margot has pointed out, we do have some of these incredible protected bike lanes on Dearborn downtown. It's a one-way street, and we have a 2-way protected bike lane, and it has its own little traffic light, and it feels very calm to be able to ride on that bike lane. Then when you get to the north end of that bike lane, it just disappears. You're on the left side of traffic, and and I've had close calls here, you have left turning vehicles that are coming across the bike lane trying to get where they're going. Huge trucks, with their front grille that's above your head. Very dangerous. We do have a Divvy bike share system, which is the largest by square miles in North America. And we have, over 550,000 unique riders in 2022. It's a really good option for last mile trips. They have stations, they have TV stations at many of the CTA stations. People do in fact use these to commute to work. You see them, and particularly there's a lot of people who are skeptical of e-bikes actually because they're more expensive. You do see men in suits, young men in suits, riding to work on their e-bikes in the morning. But then on the other hand, a lot of people got mad about this. Former Mayor Lori Lightfoot said, practical reality is we are a car city. And here's an image of her caravan blocking the bike lane so that they could get donuts. we have an amazing bike culture. And actually, I'm in this picture. You can spot me in my ridiculous outfit when everyone else is just wearing street clothes. But we have actually Chicago is very flat, and we have this grid system. And so this is street that it doesn't have a designated bike lane on it. You can see it's one way, it's pretty calm. You've got trees, it's shady, and you can really get around. And yes, the speed limit may be 30 miles per hour, but are people really going that fast? Usually not. Usually that's okay. On the other hand, I was talking, we said that those bike lanes end, and not every street is connected to a small, you can't get everywhere on these neighborhood streets, right? So this is actually an image. Last June, there were actually 3 children in just 1 month in Chicago who were killed by cars, people driving cars, or trucks. And so in this case with Lily Chambrook, she was in a bike carrier on the back of her mom's bike. There was a truck parked in the bike lane. She tried to go around it, and another truck came up and hit her, and Lily ended up dying. So, we have Vision Zero in Chicago, but still traffic fatalities have increased 17% since that was introduced. And then every year, 147 deaths, including 42 pedestrians and 5 cyclists, 2,200 plus severe injuries. So if you bike in Chicago, if you're part of the bike community, there's so many people I know who've been hit and have had injuries. So with this increase in deaths, it actually has motivated people to get more involved. There have been a lot of organizations that have been active for a long time. Active Transportation Alliance is one I've been supporting for quite some time. But there was energy to have a more bike specific organization. And I guess we're a collective, we're not a 501c3. But it's a collective of over 70 organizers that started to form in June 2022. And we do all sorts of protests, actions, community engagement events. So what are we advocating for? We are advocating for a bike grid. And so you can see in this image on the left, some of the higher quality bike infrastructure that we have in Chicago. You can see the Lakefront Trail there on the right. And you can see some of the other bike lanes going on, but as you can see, the quality infrastructure is disconnected. How does it help you if you're trying to get from one place to another and then the bike lane just ends? And so we do think that at least 10% of Chicago streets should have safe street infrastructure, and that the most realistic and cost-effective way of doing that is to focus on residential streets and do that so that you can see in this image on the right where it's connected, that you can get around. Sure, our arterials and things should have those protected lanes as well, but there's really a lot of benefit to being able to focus on residential streets and helping people get around their neighborhood with trips of less than 3 miles. You can do this relatively affordably. Here's some images that are examples of, you can see planters being put in and some of these temporary barriers. We saw a lot of this. This was during COVID. People just rapidly, in Chicago and in cities across the world, people rapidly deployed infrastructure to slow down traffic, make it more safe, to spend time in streets. In Chicago, a lot of that was pulled back. and not retained. In other cities, they took what was initially successful and they put in more permanent infrastructure. You can see here some of that where you have raised crosswalks and more of the bump outs and planters that are concrete there in some of these photos. So that's still, you know, we spent close to $1 billion on the Jane Byrne interchange, which didn't really change traffic that much. You could do this with significantly less than what we spend on that one interchange. So Chicago can be a city where, you know, we don't have 150 people dying in car crashes a year, where people feel connected to their neighborhoods and are supporting local businesses, and where everybody can enjoy getting around their neighborhoods by bike, transit, foot, and a car. So what we have seen too is when you put in better bike infrastructure, that it also reduces pedestrian crashes and fatalities that are happening there, because they'll have shorter distances to cross the street. The cars are going slower. There was also a study, I think here on part of Milwaukee Avenue, that looked at improvements for businesses. And they've shown that in New York City as well, that people want, and there are many other places that people want to spend time in areas that are not dominated by cars, and they can get around on foot and by bike. So Chicago has a couple of different, Bike Grid Now has a couple of different actions that we do, and I realize I'm running low on time, so I should be wrapping up. But we do bike jams. And so that's where people get together and we're on the streets and we are biking very slowly, 4 or 5 miles per hour. And it does slow down traffic. And we're interacting with people on the streets, and we can hand out pamphlets, and people get inspired and engaged and excited about that. Sometimes people get mad, but a lot of people, even in cars, are supportive and are interested to hear about what we're doing, and they're excited to see the joy that's experienced when people spend time together on bikes. We have bike buses, so sometimes we'll do that for a specific event. We're very collaborative. And so sometimes some other type of organization will say, hey, can you do a bike bus to this location? And we'll do that to support events. And then there's a regular on Wednesday morning, there's bike buses to downtown from a number of different neighborhoods. And we see that people do use it to commute. And there's also, it's kind of interesting, there's people who work from home. They'll come out and ride in the morning, and it's a way of with people and building community and being part of the city versus just staying at home all day. And then something else we've been doing politically is some of the neighborhoods where we have a presence, we have what we're calling Safe Streets Union. And so in Chicago, our wards, our alder people have a lot of power around infrastructure in their areas. They have a ward menu budget that what gets done. So then we're trying to further, beyond the citywide stuff, we're trying to make sure that we're connecting people who are neighbors in the immediate neighborhood. And so we have this larger group, and then we've also been all joining our local neighborhood associations, because those groups do have power, and they tend to be homeowners who are car drivers and have been in the neighborhood for a very long time. And so we've found them to be pretty welcoming of having new people joining those groups, and trying to share our voices about what we see as issues that matter in the community. I will say too, with the last election, we were pretty active politically. We were able to get endorsed. Instead of endorsing candidates, we asked them to endorse the bike grid. And so we were able to get endorsements from, actually, and this was an earlier screenshot, but we did ultimately have the endorsements from the two candidates who ended up in the runoff, both Brenda Johnson and Paul Dallas. And so right now, we essentially what's going on is what was already in the budget. So we're really looking forward to the next construction cycle and holding our elected leaders accountable to what they endorsed when they were campaigning. Yeah, and so we have gotten a lot of good coverage. And Active Trans that I mentioned, they actually gave us an award as Advocate of the Year in 2022. So we're really also trying to change the conversation and make sure that we can get coverage with the press and get in front of people so people can start thinking about it differently. Questions? Was that good? How far over did I go?
Oh, that was amazing, I must say. What a great organization and what great effort. It's really impressive. Really, really impressive.
I have a question, Liz. Thank you for that presentation. This is a topic that's near and dear to me because I do bike in the city. When I do bike, I'm very careful about where I go. I live close to the 606, which is a really beautiful bike trail. And I tend to bike on side streets. The only time I bike on main thoroughfare streets is when I'm biking in a group, right? You feel safer with numbers. So my question is, and you know, I was born and raised here. I'm very familiar with the mindset. Chicago is still a very car town. And Lori Lightfoot, I remember when she made that statement, only reinforced that. And so I guess my question is, how do you change that mindset? And I'm really thinking, I live close to Chicago Avenue, which is a major street, lots of traffic, buses, no bike lane. And I guess somebody in City Hall had the bright idea, there's a bus lane on Chicago Avenue, lots of buses. Turn the bus lane into the bike lane. Have the bikers share the lane with the buses, right? And so, right, the last thing I want to do is have a big bus bearing down on me, on my bike. So it's like, you know,
I don't like playing leapfrog with a bus.
Right.
No, thank you.
The powers that be, they don't get it. I don't think they care. We don't even have an office of the environment in the mayor's office. It's with streets and sanitation, which anybody that knows Chicago history knows that streets and sanitation is one of the most patronage agencies in the city. So how do you change that mindset? Because it's terrible.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it is, you know, in your local area, getting in front of the alder, and reaching out to other alders of areas. You know, I was chatting with the chief of staff of Waguspac's office, and we're thrilled. On Belmont, they just did protected over on the bridge and west of it. And, you know, he said, we've been getting a lot of complaints from car drivers that the traffic slowed down. Well, as a biker, I love that I'm separated. And when I cross Belmont, I'm glad that it feels like the cars are going slower. They should be going slower. And so I think trying to make sure that we're telling our electeds that when there's successes as well as the challenges, it's turning up to those meetings, honestly. That's what we've been told. You know, this is great that you're doing the Safe Streets Union and you're talking to me, but can you go to your neighborhood associations and get to know some of these neighbors who really aren't of that mindset?
You know what? I think that's
Mhm.
what I'll do, because I live in Daniel Laspada's ward, and he's a biker, and he is chair of the transportation committee in City Hall, and he's a democratic socialist. So, you know, I think, yes, yeah.
Yeah. And he had a bit of a tight race.
Sorry.
He had a bit of a tight race this last time around.
Yeah, but
He-
he won though. He didn't go into a runoff. But okay, yeah, I'll start with him because he does bike. I've seen him on his bike. And you know, as head of the transportation committee. But I mean, you know, I think the issue of the mindset, you know, that's a bigger issue, and that's something that is going to take time to change. But Chicago is, no, it's not there.
Mhm. Yeah. Paul?
So one example
Oh,
is
sorry, go ahead,
Chicago
Brenda.
was the meatpacking capital of the country, and it is also the place where veganism began.
Mm.
So we can take a look at it with that in mind. This can change, and we don't smell the packing houses any longer, but we have a lot more vegans in town.
I think
It's only been
Paul,
that we haven't smelled the packing houses
There-
too.
there's a couple of people that hands up for a while.
Yeah, Paul?
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, Liz, great presentation. I grew up outside of Chicago and started biking when I was probably 3 years old out in suburban Hinsdale, and biked at Yale regularly up to East Rock. And I've been in the West since graduation. So a huge biking culture out here. I'm just curious for you to say a little bit more about why you got into this. We know you're a Yale alum of 2010, but you know, why biking, and how does it relate to the professional work that you do?
So I'm originally from Iowa. So biking recreationally is big in Iowa. And so doing RAGBRAI, I've done RAGBRAI 7 times. And so I had my bike here in Chicago, and actually I was like, I should really try to bike commute a bit because that'll make it easier to train. I'll be biking more days a week. And then it's, just trying to get around, trying to get from, I live in Lakeview. I live on a red line neighborhood, a lot of people in blue line neighborhoods, and there's not really a good way to get there via public transportation. Is it 2 buses, or is it taking the train all the way downtown? Actually biking is a faster, better way to get between those neighborhoods. And then as you start to get into it, you start, it just builds. The more people who bike, and you're doing group rides, and it becomes, I don't know, addictive a bit sometimes.
Right.
Then as it relates to work, mostly separate. I mean, we do have actually in our buildings a lot of bike rooms. And yeah, a lot of our residents have bikes. People might be surprised. There is this stereotype of people who bike as being higher income. There's actually even more who commute by bike who are lower income in Chicago. And it is a bit of the graph is like kind of like that. So it's lower income people and higher income people that are more likely to bike.
Super, thanks.
And you had your hand up, and Nick did too, so.
Where's the hand up sign? I can't find it here.
Oh,
I kept digging,
Well,
digging.
I just
No
put my
sign.
hand up and for a while and somebody put it up.
Yeah, put it in. There's no sign here.
Kyle
just
is
have-
in reactions on the bottom.
Reactions.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, so we'll go Anne, and then Kyle, and then Nick. How about that?
Okay,
Sounds good.
okay.
So I know. Okay.
I have a quick question, I hope. I was interested in the 51% of trips are under 3 miles. And is there any breakdown? Is that residential, commercial, delivery? Do you know?
I don't know. There's a report on that, and it looked at the report was a national, and it looked at the breakdown for different cities. Offhand, I'm not sure, but I do know the majority of trips are like single occupancy vehicle, just
Okay.
individual getting around.
I mean, I'll say in DC, I live in a neighborhood that's near the metro line, but it's relatively suburban, and the e-cargo bikes are, there's a lot of them, and a lot of them are being, kids getting ferried, little kids getting ferried to school by their parents. And I used to be a bike rider. I've had hip issues, so I'm not currently a bike rider. I have dreams to be, but talking to the bike people, it was interesting because I've said, well, those e-bikes are too expensive. And then the guy said, well, but if you're thinking about it, not as an expensive bike, but as an inexpensive car, it's a very different calculus. So I thought that was very interesting.
Absolutely. Thanks. Kyle.
You know what? Nick should go first, because if it let me go, I start to joke. You get the whole laugh. You can't do that, right? So Nick, you go. I'll make people laugh to the end.
Well, good. Thanks, Liz. My son moved out, class of 11, moved out to California and San Francisco and bikes to work most of the time. And we can't get him to move back east because the biking out there is so great. And when I see 571-foot vertical in your 47 miles, that's like going out the door in San Francisco. So it's just up and down. But I told you we were involved in health, and we tout the benefits of walking, biking. But I just sort of wonder, he bikes to work for business. Is there any data in Chicago or elsewhere about what percentage of people do bike to work, and how we could get sort of, if it's a high percentage in certain businesses, could they be advocates for more biking? And two, is there any data on congestion pricing and its impact on biking when that's been implemented in cities? Because, I think we all agree it's healthier. We all agree it's better for the environment, but it's a political battle. And what sort of forces could we bring to the table to support us? Thank you.
Yeah. So for bike commuting, I think Chicago is only about 1.5%. It's not huge. I think a lot of the trips that you see are for trips that are not commuting to work. And so, getting around, doing things on a day-to-day basis. There are people who commute the loop via bike. People, you might take the train to the loop, but then you're getting around the neighborhood via bike. And then congestion pricing, I do not have the data on that. Sorry. And I guess actually I will say, in terms of, we do have, there's a bike to work week here. And I think there are employers that try to support that. It seems like a lot of actually architectural firms seem to support that. Yeah, I think that could be an avenue. Those are my thoughts on this question. Kyle, are we ready for Kyle for the jokes?
I'll just tell some story you might find fascinating. Then I have a real question about your organization. How do you want to scale up? It's a 501c3, right? I was born and raised in Beijing, China. I had nothing but a bike. Every family have 1 or 2 or 3 bikes during the revolutionary time. So when, on the street in Tiananmen Square, you ride a bike with 5,000 or 7,000 people, all jammed, like every bike is next to you, you can touch. Then there's a red light stop. They all stop right away. So it's like a big patch of this bike, like mosquitoes, like bees, all stopped. Then the light turned to green, like just flow through the whole street. So that's how the bicycle culture in China. Everybody know how to ride a bike when they're a tiny little kid, right? So in the labor camp, I served a couple years in the labor camp. I had a job using bike to transport all the food, all the big bags of rice, potatoes, and the onions, and riding that for hundreds of miles. Just to keep riding. That's the transportation you got for at that time. You do have a truck, so we're gonna save time. You chase the truck and hold on the truck, so the truck will give you a lift for a mile or two. God, the kids are incredible. That's how I grew up. But let me ask you, real question is not this thing, is your organization, how old is it?
So Bike Grid Now, Chicago Bike Grid Now was started in June 2022. We are
Okay.
not incorporated. We are not a 501c3.
Oh, you're not yet. Okay.
Not.
Okay.
And so I think that's been the future as a collective, as an organization, has been a point of question and debate. There have been a few people who've said, I feel like we don't have structure. I feel like we need structure. And until you get structure, I'm done. Because it's too, it's too ambiguous. But then on the other hand, we've been able to do a lot, be very flexible, get people involved very quickly, and just be able to do a lot of different things, be able to to be less than year-old organization and to be getting all these political endorsements. I think that was partially because we're very grassroots, and without a structure, able to move very quickly. But it is a question of, as we get larger, how do we make decisions? Who get, because it just kind of, I don't know, happens. But as you get to a bigger size, what makes sense issues are bound to come up. Do you think there's a lot of knowledge sharing that happens with different groups? And so we are learning from groups that are active in other cities, groups that are active in San Francisco and New York. Somebody who's part of our collective developed this bike bus tracker so that you can look up on your phone, where is the bike bus? It is supposed to be here at this intersection at this time. Did I miss it, or is it actually still coming? And we've shared that with people in different parts of the country. So I think to some extent there's the knowledge sharing, the technology sharing, the tactic sharing is partially a way that you scale, and to say we don't need to own all of this and control all of this, but how do we share these ideas and make things happen?
So you do have a mission? You have a mission. You know where to grow. I was thinking, you at this point you probably don't need a capital, do you? You don't need money actually. You're an advocacy group. You get people together, they share the same mindset, try to make a movement.
Advocacy and direct action, movement building. There's people who, everybody has a day job, and people spend a lot of time on this. Just in their free time, they're foiling the Chicago city government to figure out what the plans were for different intersections. They're pulling the data and spending a lot of time on that. We do have, there's some money that is, I forget what, like GoFundMe or something, and it's for the printing and the flyers, and we have little flags. I think we have really good graphic design. There's a couple of graphic designers who are part of it, and they just do the design. We don't pay anyone to do that. We have day jobs doing the same thing. So we do rely to some extent on, we're very collaborative with Active Transportation Alliance, and they have a whole staff. We have very similar missions. I mean, their mission is a little bit broader. It's about the 10% of Chicago streets and the speed limits. And I should be able to say it, but I don't have it right now off the top of my tongue. So I think, we feel like what we are able to do uniquely is this engagement, rapid deployment, movement building. And then there are these other 501c3 organizations that have staff and are able to come up with policy positions and do specific things. So we're trying to focus on what we're doing well.
One quick tip, Liz, that I've experienced with non-for-profits. If you could find a checklist of 6 criteria for decision making, then whenever a decision comes up, go through that list and see if it meets your mission and your goals. And that way you're not like doing a poll each time there's a small or large decision to make.
That's helpful. Thank
We've
you.
only got a couple minutes left. Tom has a question, and then Becky, maybe, because I came in late. Is there anything that you want to bring up before we end the meeting?
Tom, go ahead.
Tom, you're on mute there.
Have you been to Copenhagen?
I have.
Yeah,
It was amazing. I couldn't believe it.
I think Kyle's observation probably the most important one. And from my, I'm sort of in this disruptive phase. I feel like I'm running out of time generally. And Al Sharpton recently said, a lot of us are, we got where we are today because we spent so much time in the street, and we got to get back into the street. And I would think you should take some of those routes in Chicago and do what Kyle described, or what happens every single commute in the morning and in the afternoon in Copenhagen, and jam about 5,000 to 15,000 bicycles
Exactly.
together and just do your commute. And I
Make
mean, the other stuff will kind of fall into place, I think, if you begin to make that kind of a physical statement.
Yeah, and we're going to trace it all back to Kyle too.
Yeah,
I've been to Beijing. Yeah, it's very impressive still. I mean, it's nice to see that many people and that much stuff being hauled on 2 wheels. It's pretty impressive.
I used to own a company that make electric bikes in China, and also the control system in it, we call it powertrain for electric cars and boats and buses, and including bike. So I know this industry pretty well, but I grew up riding bike. There's nothing else. This only thing is the bike.
That's your choice.
Becky?
All right, well, I'm gonna close us out because it's 5 o'clock. Liz, thank you so much. That was really interesting, and I really wish you a lot of success moving this forward in Chicago. It sounds like you've got the energy and the people and the enthusiasm, so go for it. Let us know how we can help you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone else for the call. Our next call is November 15th, I believe. And Indy Burke, I believe, is going to be our speaker. Anne, is that correct?
Woohoo.
Yes, it is.
So tune in at 4 o'clock on the 15th of November, and we'll obviously send out a note reminding people. But thank you all for attending today, and see you later.
Nice
Bye.
to meet you.
Liz. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Great talk.
Bye.
Thanks. It was great.